it also feels like the Cardinals are going for it a little bit. And I'm just going to say hell yeah to that. Like, hell yeah, let's go. A lot of people feel like Will Johnson is a better prospect than all of the defensive tackles I just named. If that's the case and he is available for them and they're free and they're shoring up their D-line in other ways, I can't argue about that.
So Campbell pumped up to be back here, but what does it mean for the Arizona Cardinals in this year's draft? Johnny and I, if you look at our, we might have to tweak our top 100, but probably not too much because it's such a defensive front seven rich draft that the Cardinals would benefit still tapping into that. I mean, Calais is going to be 39 this year. So, what was your first reaction draft wise when you saw the signing of Campbell?
That outside of an edge rusher, they're going to draft a player at 16th that's not going to start for them right away. And listen, that's what good teams do. I don't think they're going to take a guard. I don't think they're going to take an off-ball linebacker. You and I have been staunchly committed to the notion that, rightfully so, this team does not prioritize those positions this high. You want to talk 10, 15, 20 picks later? Hell yeah. Gannon and Ossenford would rather do what in free agency, they're signing guys for they're nickel and dime in those positions, right? That shows you how they value them. Evan Brown, come back on a 1-year deal. Isaiah Adams, 3rd round pick. Akeem Gaithers Davis, making no money. He could call their defense. We've narrowed it down, I think. I still think defensive tackle in the right scenario could be in play. I think it's edge rusher, first and foremost still. And listen, they brought in some. We'll talk about that. They brought in a kid today who's more of a second rounder. Then it's cornerback and offensive tackle. Cardinals need an outside corner. We've hammered that point home. We assumed it would be a veteran. Maybe it's Will Johnson. And then, of course, do they love a tackle in this class enough to take it at 16 or maybe in a trade down, ideally?
Yeah.
If Membo and Will Campbell are gone and you just say, thanks, Jonah Williams, but no thanks, or maybe you play the tackle at guard for a year, then kick him over. I think that's kind of where we're at right now. I would still love to take Derek Harmon, or I love Kenneth Grant. I love Walter Nolan. Where are those guys playing? How are those guys going to play on this D-line? And again, Calais and Dalvin Tomlinson could be gone in a year, right? Yeah. Calais, this is likely it for him. Who knows? And that's not great team building. But it also feels like the Cardinals are going for it a little bit. And I'm just going to say hell yeah to that. Like, hell yeah, let's go. A lot of people feel like Will Johnson is a better prospect than all of the defensive tackles I just named. If that's the case and he is available for them and they're free and they're shoring up their D-line in other ways, I can't argue about that. That's my initial takeaway. What about you?
No, it does. It opens up my eyes in a completely different, I'm seeing it differently as far as Will Johnson. It looks differently now than it did before the signing of Calais Campbell, because he's fully capable of playing a role that you would envision, the 16th overall pick could play. Like, he can make that impact like next season. I understand beyond that, you gotta find that out. But I think that they view this draft as an opportunity to find that player in day 3 potentially of this draft, right? It's so deep. But could Will Johnson at a premium position come in and fight to play day 1? Because I think he'll, especially with where he comes in as far as the first round pick, he's going to get every opportunity to do so. And now it's just like, when you look at it from the eyes of, okay, your defensive front 7, it's much improved. And the edge group, obviously there was Red Flag City with a couple of top prospects, and then the guys went before you're even on the clock. It just makes sense to lean into a different position, but a prospect that's at the top of his positional draft class. And I think like Will Johnson, or if you look at Barron, Jahdae Barron from Texas, like I think they're very much in play at 16 in where you're drafting. If you're not in the trade down, like the positional value is there. It's not you just saying, hey, let's go get a guard. Let's go get an off-ball linebacker just because those remain the needs. I'm still not. You're not going to be able to persuade me on that unless it's in the form of a trade way down. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think edge remains probably top priority, but it depends on how the dominoes fall. And then look at it as far as probably outside corner and then tackle.
This is a little outdated graphic. We were going to update it, but then, Calais signs with the Cardinals at 38 years old. But there's a name on here that we just got done talking about. I mean, Will Johnson has done a top 30 visit. We don't have a ton of names on this yet. NFL Network's Mike Garafolo is going to join us on Thursday, and we're hoping to have more names to add to this list. Princely, the edge rusher from Ole Miss, he had a top 30 visit. He is more of a trade down second-round option. He's not a player I don't think you can take 16th overall.
Right.
Of those players that we just listed on the screen, maybe Shamar Stewart and Will Johnson are the only two. I would say so. And I would think if you were asking most people, talent evaluators, like, is Will Johnson a higher ranked prospect than Stewart 9 times out of 10? Probably, right? Yeah. Given the pedigree, the production, the measurables. Actually, Stewart's measurables are off the charts, but Stewart, he had 1.5 sacks the last 3 years. Well, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
I think we're at a point right now where outside of Mason Graham, there is not a defensive tackle, maybe to their estimation, that's worthy of the 16th overall pick, right?
Or we'll get there, right?
Right? Like, or that we'll get there.
Yeah.
And I think the edge rusher class, I love Mike Green, the player, the person, James Pierce Jr. There's some concerns about, his likability in the locker room. There's just a lot of questions. What do we know with Ossenfort? They don't mess with any of that, or they haven't to this point yet. I mean, Calais Campbell is like the ultimate locker room leader. I mean, that Calais is what they want. He's the highest standard of character that you can get for a player. I mean, Will Johnson, captain, national champion, played for Jim Harbaugh, like, checks every box. It's still not right. Yeah. It's still not my first preference. My first preference is going best available edge rusher. But guess who needs edge rushers? Let's take a look at the Arizona Cardinals and where they stand as compared to everybody else. Let's look at the draft order if we could, Damon. The Arizona Cardinals are picking 16th for a reason. They won 8 games last year. The teams ahead of them all need edge rushers. I think there it is. So Saints need an edge rusher. Chicago Bears need an edge rusher. San Francisco 49ers. Dallas needs an edge rusher opposite Micah Parsons. Miami Dolphins now. They lose Calais. They could use a D tackle. They have Chop Robinson. Colts need an edge rusher. Falcons need an edge rusher. I mean, like, could this be the inverse effect of what happened last year, where all the offensive players, skill players, and linemen go, and then there's a run on them, and then we get to the middle of the first round, and then there's Dallas Turner and some of the other defensive players. So maybe they're being proactive and are preparing. Regardless, I do think Calais Campbell changes things.
Yeah, he does. He gives you an option to, look at different positions when, the rest, if you're going to go against the grain, what the rest of the league's going to do, and prepare yourself after that board is pick clean at that single position to pivot and make a really rock solid pick, a player that was overlooked and fell because, the groupthink as far as, or just the panic in the run on a single position could put the Cardinals in a really good spot to upgrade at a different premium spot. And if it's defensive back and, Travis Hunter is the lone guy off the board by that point, I mean, that falls into the Cardinals' favor extremely well. And I think that just getting the sense of it, and it's complete speculation on my behalf, but you get the feeling that the Cardinals almost like the group at edge after this. Like, I don't think they love anybody at 16, but I think they would love to get some guys at 47 in a pretty tight group with guys you mentioned, like Princely Mielen, who came in for a top 30. And I'm sure Landon Jackson, working out here, hanging out with Damon, I'm sure he's a top 30 guy, no doubt about it. To go with Tui Malaloa, I mean, that's a group that you can easily find somebody that you put right in your rotation at 47th overall.
I mean, like, they manifested a trade down in 2023, when a lot of us thought it wasn't realistic. Like, when Anthony Richardson fell to 4, I mean, the Ossenfort got a team to come up and trade for Will Anderson Jr. and give credit. And I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about that trade. It was a good trade. But he manifested it. Can he do the same thing at pick 16? I bet his preference is to trade down and to get an additional pick. I think he would love to be able to drop 5 to 7 spots and get a third and a fourth, maybe even a second, a third and a future third, and then take one of those pass rushers. Like we've talked about it. And I don't want to sit here and say it's okay to pass on a top 10 to 12 prospect in Will Johnson. Because again, if he's there at 16, you'll have to make a decision. But if you drop to, let's say, 21, 22, 23, and you add a premium day 2 pick in the process, and you take a guy that you were already in consideration of taking at 16, so many of these guys are interchangeable. We always say it, between about pick 20 this year and 40 to 45, there's not a huge difference. It's scheme fit, it's measurables, it's medical, it's positional value. I think in a perfect world, you're trading down, you're adding a pass rusher, whatever it is. I think Landon Jackson is a perfect target. I think he's a fringe first rounder that you take in the 20s and you add a couple additional picks for this roster. Then you go and you get another developmental tackle and defensive lineman. And if you want to take a corner or a wideout, but I'm not sitting here and demanding that they pass on an elite player if they fall to pick 16, but in a year where the draft feels like it's already watered down, I don't think Will Johnson is going to be available at pick 16.
Yeah. I mean, so what are you willing to get up the board? What are you willing to give up?
Well, I don't think I would trade up for him. I think I would just, I would hope that there's a player that another team has fallen in love with that the Cardinals are not in a position to take. And then there's an opportunity for you to trade down.
Yeah.
But it puts a lot of uncertainty around this pick now, where again, you'll never hear this podcast say, take a guard or an off-ball linebacker. But like, does Kelvin Banks Jr. come into play? I don't think you can take Josh Simmons that high at 16. I don't think the kid from Texas is worth the 16th overall pick. He was a slot corner. He's only 5'10". I think that's, again, a trade down option. I mean, we're going to have to get down to brass tacks here pretty soon and say, who is worth the 16th overall pick? Can you rattle off some names?
I mean, who's worth it?
That realistically speaking, that could be there. Who is worth it to you?
It's tough to say just because there's concerns, and this was even before the Calais Campbell signing. And, you know, like James Pierce Jr., you know,
Mike
like
Green.
now the Campbell thing just does kind of create snap opportunities for Walter Nolan, a Kenneth Grant, even though that, you know, he's not going to play the same position as Kenneth Grant on the D line. But it just becomes a little bit more, the water gets a little murkier, but it also opens up, you know, Will Johnson looking more, you know, he would be him or Josh Simmons, because, you know, Fran Duffy's sitting there and saying Josh Simmons, as far as Cardinals criteria, checks about every box outside of the injury that he sustained to his knee in his last season at Ohio State. I mean,
is that good value though?
Yeah. I mean, he's a starting tackle in this league. He projects to be. He's a big, athletic, premium position. Like that's what, you know, Monty Ossenfort has a track record of selecting in the draft and in his last two drafts. So I don't know. I mean, I think that Simmons before Calais Campbell would be a tough pill to swallow. Same thing for Will Johnson, just because he's like, hey, the need's there. And you feel like even if you're reaching for some different prospects down the board, it would be justifiable more so than taking a player outside of that big need that you have. Now your need is less, not completely fulfilled, but it softens the blow significantly.
I think we're on the same page. I think Will Johnson is a outlier that you have to consider now if you hadn't already, and then it's a line of scrimmage player of some kind. We got more content coming up here. Drop us a like.